Welcome into Sports Around the Bar, where the NFL is back and in full swing. Drew, good to have you on the show, man. I don't know about you, but I am excited to talk about all of these overrated and underrated teams that don't quite deserve their records here this week. How you doing, man?
I'm doing better ever since I opened up this beer, man. I tell you.
Funny how it just takes the edge off. We're going to start, again, with all of these teams that have started the season either undefeated or totally defeated, and we're going to talk about which teams deserve it, which teams are where they're at, where we think they're going to go down the line, and we want to get your opinion on all of this too, so make sure you give us a shout out in the comments when you are feeling anything. Again, if you're new to the show, we like to read all of these out, or at least as many as we can, just to kind of get everybody involved and get your opinion, so it's not just two guys talking to you on a screen. So without too much further ado, I'm going to pull up the comments. Still the hardest part of this setup is trying to manage all of that and talk at the same time. But we're going to start with our first team. Actually, Drew, I'm going to let you decide. Do we start with the undefeateds or do we start with the teams that just haven't got together yet? Or do you want to go back and forth?
No, let's go with the undefeateds.
Let's start with the undefeateds, and we're actually going to start in your division with the best team maybe of the season, or at least the biggest surprise, the Oakland Raiders, dude. 2-0. Do they deserve that?
You know what? Yes, they do, man. They have played really, really well, man. It was incredible to watch a team. I didn't think they were going to go into Pittsburgh and win that game. I'm not going to lie. You know what? This Raiders team has to be for real with the way they're playing, right? I was kind of like, first week they relied way too much on Darren Waller. Can't throw the ball 19 times to one guy. They really got no one else involved in their passing game. Then they go out to Pittsburgh and play like that and put up points against that kind of defense. They add Ruggs into the passing game. You know, they did it without their number one running back. I mean, and it seems like right now that Max Crosby might be Defensive Player of the Year if he keeps playing the way he's playing. I mean, this is really great start for the Raiders. And as much as I don't like it, I have to say I think this team's for real.
I'm just excited to see like this Derek Carr kind of resurgence that we've seen out of him. I mean, through the first couple games, he's throwing like 400 yards a game. I mean, he looks like the Derek Carr from when he had Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. He looks nearly undefeatable when he steps on the field, and he did it against good defenses. You know, say what you want about the Ravens, they always seem to be somewhere in the mix when it comes to the top end of the NFL in defense. And then he did it against, in my opinion, what might be the best defense in the league this year, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I know they lost TJ Watt early. I know that probably played a big effect because he already had a bunch of pressures, and he was already impacting the game, really just destroying Alex Leatherwood on the right side. How big of a loss do you think that was for Pittsburgh? Do you think that score line changes if TJ Watt plays the whole game?
It's a possibility. I mean, that's kind of like, you know, what if Ben Roethlisberger was 10 years younger just on that game?
Right.
It doesn't. This league is meant to have injuries, and it's meant to be deep enough in your roster to be able to control that. And obviously, when you lose someone like TJ Watt, it's a huge loss, and you can't really recover. You're kind of just putting a Band-Aid over an open wound. Does he change the outcome of the game? I don't think so. I think the way that the Raiders are playing and the way that this team seems to believe in themselves, I don't think one player on the defense on the other side of the ball makes that much of a difference in the outcome of this game.
Now, they've done it through being aggressive on first down. They're throwing a lot. I think they said they're up to like 65 or 66% on first down passing the ball. Do you think that's a bit of a... Because at least what I've sort of seen is just Gruden does not have a lot of faith in this offensive line, and probably rightfully so. They're not running the ball a lot on early downs. Do you think it was just because Jacobs is out that's skewing that, or do you think it was one of those things where they've kind of acknowledged that like the offensive line isn't the strength it used to be, and they're trying to change their game to kind of keep up with that? So because so far the aggressive tactic has worked.
No, I think the whole NFL is trending to pass first, run second. I think that back in the day where you had a great running back and he was just the ball hog and you just give him the ball over and over, I think those years are done for now. I don't see that being anything coming up anytime soon. The way they're calling penalties on your defensive backs, I mean, it just makes it so much easier to pass the ball. They can't, be all over and cover like they used to. It's changing the league. And I think old coaches like Gruden, who did play an era where they did run the ball first and pass second, they're kind of learning. And I think they finally got a play caller, and I can't remember the play caller's name, but I know they changed their offensive coordinator. And it's a change in the league, and I think they're just accepting it. And they got someone like Derek Carr who seems to flourish in it.
Absolutely. Chris, good to see you. He says, go Colts. Don't worry. This warms my Titan fan heart. We're going to talk about them a little bit later. But anyway, I say that, but my team was very, very close to being on this list of 0-2 teams as well. So we'll talk about the Colts here coming up in just a little bit. Drew, final question on the Raiders. Is this sustainable?
Oh, man, I don't know. I thought Kansas City was going to go 17-0. I don't think anything's sustainable. Derek Carr did get banged up a little bit. He came back in. I'm sure we'll play next week, but got to watch him. If he gets hurt, if he goes down, I think it changed the whole entire season.
Yeah, with Mariota on IR, I mean, I don't know about you. I'd love to see Nathan Peterman get another shot. It's always entertaining. It's not always good football, but it's always entertaining when Peterman's on the field.
If this team stays healthy, yes, I think this is sustainable.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go with no. I don't think so. I think, Pittsburgh has had a lot of problems. I've kind of talked about that. Their own problems offensively. Big Ben's starting to look old. Like, the receivers really haven't hit in the way that we kind of expected when they brought Juju back and they had Claypool. And then on top of that, their offensive line looks just as bad as we all kind of predicted it would be. On top of that, Najee Harris, I know they kind of drafted him. I'm not putting any of this on Najee Harris because he has, like, the shortest amount of time before he's hit out of any running back. It's like 0.4 yards before first contact for him. I just don't see this offense really being a powerhouse, and I think Oakland did a good job taking advantage of that. Their defense absolutely thrived. You look at that pass rush, and I think they surprised the Ravens team week 1. I'm just not bought in yet. So, sorry, Oakland fans, or I should say Las Vegas fans now. I just don't know that I'm quite bought into it just yet, unless I see Derek Carr do it for another 3, 4, 5 weeks where it's just 400 yards every week in and week out.
Rami says it was just luck for the Raiders. He says it's luck. So he's kind of with you on that. Ian says, yada, yada, yada. Ravens are third in the AFC North. No panic on the Steelers side. Raiders have our number. Raiders have won 4 out of the 5 last times from the Steelers. It is what it is. I don't know, man. I don't know if I fully believe that. I guess we'll see on week 3, right? See what the Raiders do.
Absolutely.
I think this team's for real.
Chris goes on to say, a healthy Raiders team is a good team. The question is, can they continue to stay healthy? Because he doesn't feel like they've got the depth to compete if not. I agree with that. I think they've made some great kind of veteran additions. Guys like Casey Hayward that kind of got thrown out in the trash heap after last season. They picked him up on the cheap, and he's worked out really well for them. So, long term, I don't know that I see Oakland really standing the test of time. Will they probably beat my 5 or 6 wins that I gave them before the season started? At this point, I got to say probably yes. But that's still a tough division. I mean, we're talking about a lot of teams that are either undefeated or at the very least a threat. I mean, you have the Chiefs at 1-1, you have the Chargers at 1-1, and you have the Broncos that have started out 2-0 strong as well. It's a tough division out west, regardless of which conference you're in.
Well, let's go about those Broncos, the 2-0 Broncos.
Let's talk about the Broncos next because now with the Jaguars under their belt, they're sitting at 2-0. Is Teddy Bridgewater the solution this team has been waiting for?
It is the solution for now. Yeah, I told you I liked this move during the offseason. I think Teddy Bridgewater is how can I explain it? Because he's not average. He's just above average in the sense like he's not going to turn the ball over. He's not going to go out there and make highlight reels and look so amazing where you're like, this guy's just incredible. It's not going to be pretty. He's just going to go out there and make plays. But that's exactly what they needed from this guy. That defense has found a resurgent with Von Miller coming back healthy. Who knows if Bradley Chubb, what he'll be like when he gets back on the field from his injury. But if you're asking me, is this team for real at 2-0? I'm going to say the Broncos are not for real at 2-0. I think that this is just a schedule win where they play 2 weak teams right off the bat and look good doing it. And that's honestly it. And that's really not a knock on Teddy Bridgewater. It's just until they play a team that's decent, I got to say this is not a for real 2-0 team.
I'm going to kind of go the other direction because while I don't see them as like a Super Bowl roster, I don't see this as like a team that we get to the end of the year and they're like, man, the Broncos have snuck into the AFC Championship. I do say that Teddy Bridgewater is the kind of quarterback that this team needs. And when I say that, I mean you have a good defense. They've spent, a remarkable amount trying to up the secondary and get better, all the way from drafting Surtain to bringing in a bunch of veterans this offseason as well. And then you've got Von Miller, like you said, having that resurgent year where it looks like we're getting young Von Miller again. I don't know if that's going to last, but if this defense stays good, the offensive line's playing well, they're running the ball effectively. I know they played two bad teams, but we say it all the time. You can only beat who's in front of you, Drew. So when I look at this team, I got to say Teddy Bridgewater's the guy they needed, just the guy who doesn't make mistakes. We'll see what happens when they play the Chiefs twice. We'll see when they play some of these other better teams in the AFC, what this team looks like and whether Teddy Bridgewater is going to be enough, because that's kind of my worry. This, to me, is starting to look a little bit more like a 10-7 team, maybe 11-6. I just don't see them reaching the heights with a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, because it's going to come down to the point where you're going to need to outshoot teams like the Chiefs. You're going to maybe even need to outshoot teams like the Chargers once they get these penalties under control. I just don't know that Bridgewater provides that. So for now, I'm going to say I can't call them frauds. I can't say they don't deserve it. I don't know that they're the 2-0 team that's going to storm into the AFC Championship. We're going to say, man, we didn't see that coming. I see them more as that team that maybe is a fringe playoff team and let you down right towards the end.
Hey, Jeremy. Hey, Cody. Glad you guys could join us. Man, it's got to be schedule-based, man. I mean, look at Giants first week. They looked absolutely terrible. Jags the second week. We kind of all know where the Jags are sitting at. They're about to get the Jets again, or not again, but you're about to get another weak team again in the Jets in week 3. I mean, I guess the plus thing that the Broncos have going for them is if there's any kinks that they need to work out, they should have 3 easily winning games for them to do it. So far they've won 2 of them. I know it's the NFL. I know every game's tough to win, but let's be honest. I mean, if you're going to pick 3 teams that you want to start your season out with, it might be the Giants, the Jags, and the Jets.
Now, I agree. It's an easy start to the schedule, but you got to make hay when the sun shines, right? Like, you got to beat the teams that are in front of you, and they've done that pretty handily. I know they haven't put up those 40-point numbers that make everybody kind of stop and look and say, "Wow, this offense is just amazing." But they handled the teams that are in front of them. They've won comfortably. And as far as the Giants go, I think we're still kind of on the fence as to how good the Giants actually are. I know they kind of got bodied first week, but I don't know if you watched that Thursday night football game. They look good against Washington's defense. Like, Daniel Jones looked really effective with a terrible offensive line. Now, I don't know. I look at the Giants and I say that team, while on paper doesn't look like it's one of the best, I mean, their defense looks like it should be all right. We knew their offensive line was going to be a problem. The Giants, to me, aren't the dogs that they were last year. I think they're a little bit better than that, so I give the Broncos a little bit more credit for making that look like an easy win.
I want to go back at some of these comments. Cody says he can't buy in until he sees the O-line and D-line modify more, and he's talking about the Raiders. I don't want to jump back to another team, but I don't know how you can say that, Cody. I mean, they're adjusting in game for sure. I mean, definitely playing a defensive line like the Steelers. I mean, that offensive line for the Raiders had to adjust.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just part of the game. So I guess I can see why you're not buying in on it because it's week 2. But I don't know if I can say that the reason I'm not buying in is because they're O-line and D-line. But yeah, I mean, clarify if you want, man.
Absolutely. Ian says, while we're bringing up the past, Ian says the Steelers' offensive line is the weak link. As soon as it comes together, watch out for Harris. I agree. Like, none of this is on Najee Harris. I think he's leading the league, or he's second in the league in broken tackles already. Like, you just got to give a running back time and space to work, and then. To me, I've always said the running back is 20% of the equation of the running game. Your offensive line is 40, and your actual offensive scheme is the other 40%. So when you look at the Steelers, they've got the 20%. I don't know that I love the scheme, but it's not terrible. So as soon as that offensive line comes together, I agree. But are they going to come together? To me, I think the failure kind of you look back and you say, why do we let guys like Fielder go? Why do we let guys like Alejandro Villanueva leave? Especially when you look at Villanueva, he didn't get paid anything. Like, he sat out in free agency forever. The Steelers just didn't bring him back. They're ready to move on and didn't have any answers for that. So you take all of that and you ask, why did we draft a running back in the first round? I don't know. And, I kind of want to talk about your point here lately, Drew, from before, I should say, where you said the NFL is now a running league and everybody's kind of embracing that. I don't know, because the Steelers went and drafted a first-round running back. That, to me, doesn't scream a team that says we're just going to throw the ball early and often, does it?
Yeah, I said it was a passing league, not a running league. But yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, a running back is important to have. To be honest, we talk about.
I'm usually pretty hard on running backs than you are.
Yeah, you are, and you definitely don't like him coming out of the first round in a draft. And
if he's going to come out of the first round, he's got to be special. Like, you need a Dalvin Cook, you need a Derrick Henry, you need a Christian McCaffrey or an Alvin Kamara. He had better be the game changer and like like one of your best weapons if you're going to take him in the first round. Because you can get so many second and third, fourth round running backs that ultimately wind up being more than serviceable. So,
Chris says Teddy's going to win games that he's supposed to. The question is, can he win the big games? I think that's exactly what I was getting at too. Is he's gonna do it. He's gonna win some games, but he's not gonna do it pretty. So what happens if like week 4 when they play the Ravens and they're down 14-0? Do you see Teddy Bridgewater bringing this kind of offense with the loss of Jerry Jeudy into a win? And I don't know. I think it's in Baltimore. Let me double check. It is.
I mean, I don't care where it is, if I'm going to be honest. No, I don't see him. Like, this is not the team to come back from a deficit. This is not the team to come back from a deficit. 100%, you're right. This is the team that you plow ahead and, you either get ahead and you start running the ball and you play good defense against teams, or things start to get a little dicey from there. So I'll give you that. I think when you look at the strength of schedule so far, they haven't really had to face that too much. They did go down 7 against Jacksonville. Does that factor into it? I mean, Trevor Lawrence had that one nice drive at the beginning of the game, and then after that didn't look quite so good, but still.
Just to clarify with Cody's comment earlier, he meant to say solidify, not modify. I agree with that, Cody. I can agree with that. I mean, right now they're definitely playing off the arm of Derek Carr for sure. There's no doubt about it for the Raiders.
Ian also said Villanueva is the weak link on the Ravens line. He was week 1 when they asked him to play right tackle when he's historically been a left tackle. That's actually been a pretty big problem in the NFL this year. There have been a lot of guys that used to be left tackles that they've been signed and they've been moved to the right and they've been terrible. Last week against the Chiefs, he graded out really highly against a couple places I was looking. So, there were people saying Villanueva was one of the best offensive line performances in week 2 that we've seen so far. So remains to be seen what happens when Ronnie Staley comes back to play that left tackle, whether they move Villanueva back to the right or what happens. But at the very least, week 2 was really good for him, and the signing's looking a lot better now than it did after the first week.
Villanueva actually, after week 1 game, admitted that he felt like a rookie out there on the right-hand side because he's so used to the left-hand side. So, maybe like you said, there is a trend going on where you're taking these veterans and putting them on the opposite side of the line because I didn't play offensive line, but I do know some people that have, and it is not easy to switch sides because you're just second nature is to move towards that side, and to switch it completely changes everything up.
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of like related a little bit to switch hitting in baseball. There are a few guys who can do it. Most guys, it's like it would take a lot to get trained up to hit a different side of the ball. I think it's the same way in the offensive line, and I think that's why you see guys like Jack Conklin, who got signed by Cleveland last year. They said, even though we paid him all this money, we're not going to try to shift him over to left tackle. We're just going to let him play right, and we're going to draft a tackle instead to play the left side because he's been dominant from the right side. Why mess with something that's already working?
Absolutely.
Let's move on. Let's talk about our next team that is definitely not deserving of this 2-0 record. We have to talk about them. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Drew. Have they earned this 2-0 spot in your mind?
I thought this is your second favorite team, man. What do you mean they don't deserve it? I thought this was your team besides the Titans.
It is. See, it's hard. It's hard to rep that now because now that they won the Super Bowl, everyone's like, oh, yeah, crazy. Amazing how that works out. But let me just say, I've sat through a lot of bad Buccaneer football and not got the credit for being a fan of theirs. So,
well, I can stand here and let everyone know that you were a fan before that happened. No, this is a legitimate 2-0 team. This is a very, very good team. I don't know what it is. Gronk seems to just have it this year. Last year when I saw him play and he was in this offense, I was like, why did they ask him to come out of retirement? Like, it didn't look that great. And I don't know what happened, man. Fountain of Youth is somewhere Tom Brady has it.
It's that Florida sun. It's that Florida sun, man. This year they look really good. What they got, like already 5 touchdowns, 4 or 5 in week 2. It's crazy. This is a legitimate team, and it's a scary team. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt that anyone that plays this team has to come out with their A game if they're going to beat this team. Brady's thrown 9 touchdowns for 2 weeks. So, yeah, I think they're for real. I mean, we talk about strength of schedule, and we can all say the Cowboys' defense isn't that good, but they did just hold the Chargers under 20 points. I mean, that's no easy feat with the way Justin Herbert has looked. On top of that, I get it, it's the Falcons, but they scored at will. I know they kind of like took their foot off the gas, let the Falcons catch back up by about halftime last week, and then as soon as it was 28-25, they're like, okay, let's start playing again, and they dropped another 20 points on them like it was nothing. So yeah, they look every bit the team to beat out of the NFC. I mean, I know the Packers have looked better against the Lions. I know there's still teams like the Rams that looked good at times against Indianapolis outside of shooting themselves in the foot by botching that punt at the end of the game. This just looks like it's the Buccaneers conference, doesn't it?
Oh, it definitely does. If I'm correct, don't the Rams and the Bucs play here soon? Am I crazy?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Don't the Rams and the Bucs play here pretty soon? Am I crazy? They literally play next week. Next week we're gonna see those two face off. It is, in Tampa, in LA. The Bucs come and they got to play them in LA. We're gonna find out whose conference it actually is with that. I mean, it's till that happens. I gotta just slightly give to the Bucs. But
I agree.
If the Rams come out and beat them, I think it's the Rams conference.
I'll say it's one game. I don't know. It's too early for me to say that it's like, even if the Rams came out and destroyed them, I would just say it's probably just a bad game out of Tampa. Interestingly enough, though, this will actually be the first game Tom Brady has been in Tampa and is going to face an away crowd, just because there hasn't been crowds in the NFL. So this would be the first time he's getting a full stadium on the road in Tampa Bay.
Frank, good to see you. It's actually his first time ever playing in LA too, which is crazy if you think about it. He's been playing in the NFL for 2 decades and never played in the LA. This is his first time ever playing in LA.
Ian goes on to say he's so sick of Tampa Bay. He says they're now the bandwagon team of the NFL. But that kind of fanfare just follows around Tom Brady. I mean, if you look at the NBA, LeBron's got that kind of fanfare. People just cling. A certain percent of every fan base just cling to the guys who win. We can debate whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing to do later on, but you just can't deny that that's a factor. It doesn't seem to matter where Tom Brady goes. He's going to bring a certain chunk of NFL fans wherever he goes with him.
Oh, absolutely he is. Sharif, man, good to see you. Glad you came in and joined us.
Absolutely. Ramey also goes on to say the Buccaneers have to watch out for Aaron Donald. He's sure Aaron Donald will put the pressure on Tom Brady. The other question is, Brady's not... Even Carson Wentz, you look at it last week, where he was just constantly being harassed by Aaron Donald. Brady's not running like that. So it will be an interesting point. The question is going to be, will Tampa's offensive line fare any better than the Colts did? So interesting point when we look forward to what's going to happen this week as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts definitely have a good offensive line, but so do the Bucs. It'll be interesting what Bruce Arians comes up with to stop that from happening, because there's only so much you can do until Aaron Donald makes his name into that game.
Absolutely. Sign a couple fullbacks and let them try to both go for his knees. Let's talk about our next team, which is the Carolina Panthers. A little bit more mystery in this one. I think we both kind of agree the Buccaneers are for real. You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that just did not intensely dislike Tom Brady that would say the Buccaneers don't look like they're the real deal. So we won't dwell on them for too much longer. We'll talk about the Panthers next. Is this team a team that's beat the Jets, a team that's playing the Houston Texans this week, and a team that, I'll admit, this is the most impressive win so far, has just dominated the Saints? Are they a 2-0 contender, Drew, or is there a little bit of an element to pretentiousness in this?
You would ask me this after week 1 where they beat the Jets 19-14. I would have sat there and told you, well, it's the schedule. They played the Jets, and the Jets are not a very good team this year. I thought they'd take a bigger step. Maybe it's just going to take some time for them. But when you play the Saints, and the Saints just did what they did last week 1, you think, okay, the Saints are back to being good, and Carolina comes out and just kind of beats them like that, almost just dominates them, to be honest with you. It's hard not to believe in this team, but I also got to remind myself it's division rivals. Division rivals, sometimes they just sneak a game out. I mean, how many times have the Patriots lost the Dolphins?
Yeah.
When the Patriots hand down are just a better team, the Dolphins come in and squeak one off.
Counterpoint would be the Bills to that. How many times the Patriots just own the Bills, but, Yeah. But I agree with you.
Do I believe in this team? I believe in this team to win the division. I do not believe in this team. No, I believe in this team to have a chance to win the division. I do not believe in this team to go anywhere in the playoffs.
They're going to go toe-to-toe with the Buccaneers for most of the season?
They only got to play them twice, man. What if they win every game but those 2 games?
Wow. That's impressive. That's high praise from a team that, again, a couple weeks ago wasn't really on a lot of radars. Let me say this. I'm just happy I'm a little bit vindicated. I know it's been 2 weeks. I've just been a little bit vindicated with Sam Darnold because forever I said, if he ever got out of New York, I felt like he was going to be a good quarterback. He was also the guy that I had as my number 1 quarterback out of that draft class. Now, obviously, you look at Baker Mayfield, you look at Josh Allen, you look at Lamar Jackson. Things weren't looking good for my pick for Sam Darnold. But let me tell you, it's nice to have that little bit of refreshing just quarterback play from a guy that you believed in. You're like, maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe all that tape I watched on him in college wasn't just for nothing. Maybe it's the Jets, man. Maybe it's the Jets. And we'll talk about them in a minute.
Ramy says their defense, talking about Carolina, is surprisingly right now. I mean, you're right, man. I mean, that's the reason why I'm saying if they could keep this going, I think they're ranked number 1 in yards and scoring in the NFL after week 2. They can keep this going. Why couldn't they push Tampa Bay, for this division? Why not?
I think when it comes down to it, just pound for pound, you got to say everything Carolina does, Tampa just looks like they do better. And the other, if I had to point to one specific thing, I'd say it's the offensive line, because it's still been a weakness on this team. I know they beat up the Jets. I know they beat a Saints team that, let's face it, has a good defense. Kept the Packers to, 3 points, Drew? 7, 3? I don't remember. It was bad.
Right.
When I look at the Panthers' offensive line, I just wonder if they're going to have what it takes to stand to last the gauntlet of this 17-week season. I don't know. I like Sam Darnold, but remember, he's also the guy that said, I was seeing ghosts out there. I wonder if the pressure starts to dial up when he plays some of these better teams, and he starts seeing a few more ghosts out there in Carolina too. So, still, I got some reservations. I don't know that I'm ready to call this team a contender just yet, and I don't know that them playing the Texans on Thursday is going to change my mind. But, at the very least,
tough game in week 4 with the Cowboys. Maybe we'll see what they're really made of, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that to me is the next test, right? Like, I can't say they're untested because I have a lot of respect for what the Saints have done. And they just manhandled that team. Yeah. So it's not nothing, but I'm also not ready to say, like you're saying, and say that they can push Tampa Bay to win this division. I don't quite know that they're that good yet.
I did say that, but what I'm saying is they keep this rolling. That defense keep playing the way they're playing. They don't turn the ball over. They believe in Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, why not, man? Why not?
I just told you the offensive line, but I hear you. I mean, it's hard to overcome the first defense in the league, right? Like Tampa,
the Jets.
So far, they've been great.
The Jets don't have that great of a defensive line, so I can't really say too much. But they do have playmakers on that defense. Wow, I just blanked on the team they just played last week. The Saints actually have a really good defensive line. They have one of the best pass rushers in the game in Cameron Jordan. So, and they won. So. Maybe that offensive line is not as bad as we're, all thinking it looks like.
Absolutely. Ian goes on to say the Saints play much better at home when they aren't playing in New Orleans as a home team. The Saints should stay in Jacksonville. Yeah, show Jacksonville what it's like to have a winning team on the field. He also says maybe that fire today on the roof of the dome was a good thing. Yeah, as if it wasn't bad enough for the Saints to go back after a hurricane in New Orleans. Now you have the actual stadium catching on fire. So. Oh, this team can't catch a break to get a home game, can they?
Can't. Joey, good to see, says, go Cowboys. Y'all going to see how great this team is. Is going to be this year, huh? I think they're pretty good, man. I think they just got a bad break on week 1.
It was an impressive win against the Chargers. Now, I know the Chargers had, I think it was 85 passing yards called back based on penalty. So, if they clean that up, I don't know if the Cowboys win that game, but it was an impressive win. And let me just say, Micah Parsons playing defensive end looks like just a stud. That was, to me, one of the most impressive and under-talked about points from this week. Just taking a middle linebacker and lining him up at defensive end, and he looks like one of the better ones in the league with nothing happening, or with no time to prepare. So I don't expect it to go, that swimmingly week in and week out for him. But man, in DeMarcus Lawrence's absence, that was exactly what they needed against the Chargers.
Getting back to Carolina, Jeremy says, can McCaffrey stay healthy? He is the workhorse. Others need to step up. I agree with you that he is a workhorse, but I also believe just give them a little bit of time. You're going to see that passing game get a lot better. I mean, Robbie Anderson and the other receivers in that group, they're playmakers, man. I mean, I think it's just a matter of time when they get just enough game underneath them to you'll really see it, take off.
Personally, this kind of factors into what we complained about a couple of years ago, even when the Panthers weren't good, and they were still just giving McCaffrey 30-some plus touches a week, where we talked about, what are you doing? You're already out of the playoffs, and you're just going to beat this weapon into the ground without any need. That was when they should have been spelling him and using him less often. I feel like we're now starting to feel the effects of that a little bit. So I agree with you. Health is going to be a big issue, but all of this could have been avoided with smarter play calling 3 years ago. So... personally, it's something we've been complaining about. I know I complained about it, Drew. I think I remember you complaining about it too, where the Panthers were just out of playoff contention, but they were still just feeding McCaffrey over and over and over again. This is kind of the penalty that you incur later down the line, especially with running backs.
Yeah, you would think you would want to keep him sidelined, but you know what? He's a player and he wants to, and you know how some of these guys are. They want to play. They love this game. That's why they do what they do. And I'm sure he was in
I
the
didn't,
coach's ear like, don't you dare set me.
and that's where you got to be the coach, right? I'm not saying you have to sit him, but you have multiple running backs on this team. Don't give him 35 touches. Don't give him 30 touches. Give him 15 and then let somebody else touch the ball too.
Yeah, but they all play to win the game. I mean, even if you're losing, your best playmaker is him. So,
But should you? I mean, think about how much better you are. I mean, how many teams like the Eagles last year just kind of like threw away a pick at a quarterback because they wanted to win a couple extra games? I don't know. A debate for another time. But
right.
We'll say this, at the very least, Drew, Panthers, you think they're a little bit more for real than I do, but we both kind of agree they're on that cusp of being one of those teams that might step up and be that surprise playoff team coming up here. Let's move on, and we'll talk about the 49ers next. 2-0, Drew. And outside of like the first half against the Lions, maybe not quite as pretty as it should have looked up to this point, right? Is this a real team?
It feels like a real team, doesn't it? I mean, it feels like everything they do seems to work. If it's run the ball, they seem to run the ball well with Elijah Williams. If the running game is not working, so they decide to throw the ball, that looks really good. If they need their defense to step up, that goes really well. I mean, it seems like everything that they choose to do seems to work for them. So, yeah, I think this team is real at 2-0.
I do too. I mean, I'll say I felt like that game was more a factor of the Eagles playing better than I thought they were and the Eagles being tougher than I thought they would be at the beginning of the season than it was a letdown for me. I mean, 17 points probably should have hung a little bit more on a team like the Eagles that, again, I know defensively, if you look at all the stats for this year, they look really good, but I almost throw that entire week one out because I think Atlanta might just be a sinking ship at this point. What I want to talk about in this game, though, is Jimmy G going to last the entire season? So as much as I want to say, yes, I believe in this team and I see them being one of those groups that we get to the end and all four of those NFC West teams are just battling it out for what might be the 3 wild cards and the division win. I wonder that you're going to have calls for guys like Trey Lance to come in when some of these games continue to be a struggle down the line. You know, if you lose a couple games and you have a struggling Jimmy G against a team that maybe it doesn't have that same level of respect, it's going to kind of get in the coach's head, and they're going to start trying to play musical chairs at quarterback, and I don't see that as the right solution here.
You should have seen more points out of this offense than 17, especially after when Brandon Graham went down. The best player probably on that Eagles defense he's out for the year with a torn Achilles. You would think that you would see more out of this offense, but that's what I'm telling you is, and I talk about this all the time. If your offense isn't rolling, you expect your defense to step up. Well, guess what they did? Nick Bosa had 2 sacks. I mean, this is what you expect. Is if that part's not working, here's the next piece. Hey, this is working. Win games. And so far, after 2 weeks, looks like that's what 49ers are doing.
I absolutely agree. I think this team, again, on paper, Drew, I'm going to ask you again, do you see this as a real contender?
I think we'll find out after week 3 when they play the Green Bay Packers.
I think so too. And historically, they've done pretty well against Aaron Rodgers and his hopeful team that turned vengeance for not drafting him spot. So I agree. I think this is one of those teams that we need to see a little bit more of before I'm ready to proclaim them to be as good as they should be. But for at least a quarter and a half against Detroit, I was like, this team is for real. We'll see what happens further on here. Let's move on and talk about, again, another team out of the NFC West, the LA Rams at 2-0. I know it was a bit more of a sweat in Indianapolis than I thought it was going to be at the outset of that game. What is your opinion on the Rams going forward? Are they going to be the team to beat like we kind of predicted in the NFC West, or is another one of these teams going to rise and take that spot from them?
Just to talk about last week's game or this week's game, I think it just proves that the Colts might actually be a really good team as long as that quarterback can stay healthy. I don't really think it was poor play by the Rams. I just think it just showed how well the Colts were or are. Yeah, this is a legitimate team. The way that defense is playing, the way that Matthew Stafford is stepping into this offense and that role of this leader of this team, it looks like a match made in heaven. I honestly think if they don't make it to the Super Bowl, it's a bust season. In the NFC Championship game, it's going to be the Bucs and Rams, and we're going to be a preview of it in Week 3. This team is legit.
I don't know. That division is so tough that, yeah, I agree they are the best, but It's just you lose one player, and that can all go out the window. I mean, so much of that defense, in my opinion, hinges on Aaron Donald just blowing everything up. And I know he's the guy who can do it. But can you imagine if he misses a few weeks in the middle of the season? Can you imagine if he's out for 6 weeks towards the back half? Like, I don't know what this defense looks like without him. So while I agree this is 100% the team we thought they could be, we knew those stars on defense were going to be great. Jalen Ramsey obviously playing like the best corner in football right now. Aaron Donald playing like the best defensive player, if not, you could argue for his position, the best player in the NFL, period. The sustainability of leaning on two guys that are that great and having everybody else kind of play around that, you're really, really top heavy, and you're really asking both of those guys to be active and be present and be dominant in almost every moment of the game. And I don't know, like the Indy game, I also agree with you. It looked like a great performance out of Indianapolis, and outside of the Carson Wentz injury right at the end of the game where they had to bring in Eason, that game was 100% up in the air. Would you feel any different if Indy had managed to win that game as opposed to losing it?
Well, we wouldn't be talking about them because they wouldn't be 2-0. I would still tell you
right.
that this team's legit. What you're saying is, can they stay healthy? And, that is a question mark for every team in the NFL is, can your stars, stay healthy? But if you look at Jalen Ramsey and you look at Aaron Donald, for the most part, their careers have been healthy. So you're asking them to do something that they have done so far in their whole entire career in the NFL. So I don't think you're asking anything out of the ordinary. If you're asking Carson Wentz to stay healthy for a year, you might be kind of,
Well, he hasn't already done that. This is like injury number 3 if you count both of the ankles this week.
Exactly. It's not good. It's not a good wish. So yeah, this team's legit. Yeah, I think they're going to stay healthy, and I think this team is talented enough. Minus Aaron Donald and minus Matthew Stafford getting injured. I think this team can handle any other injuries that come across.
Okay. Interesting. Cody goes on to ask, did Eason play for the Colts? He did. On the last drive that ultimately he wound up coming in to throw an interception on, Carson Wentz actually sprained both of his ankles on the same play, which, it kind of came on a play where Aaron Donald got through the line. I know that doesn't really narrow it down, but basically Aaron Donald got through the line, latched onto Carson Wentz. Wentz was dragging him and just kept extending the play with Donald just kind of clamping down on him. It really looked like a lion chasing down a gazelle, and wound up hurting both of his ankles on that play, and them having to put Eason in to finish the game out. Comes in, throws 2 passes, one was intercepted by Ramsey, and that was it. So he did play only for a very little bit right at the end of the game, and now Wentz's status is kind of questionable for whether he's going to play against the Titans this next week.
He's asking, how do you manage the sprain of both ankles?
You deadlift a guy like Aaron Donald who's trying his best to drag you to the ground.
I think what it's really going to hurt this team is them not having a veteran presence behind Carson Wentz when he's injury prone. Eason is not the answer, and we all know that the AFC South, a game or two might be your chance of winning this division. You don't want to start Eason, and that looks like that's what they're going to have to do.
And Jeremy also goes on to say, just go down. I agree. He probably should have just given up on the play and said, well, they got me. But I felt like there were a lot of those plays that if he said, they got me, the score looks a lot different. Just because he was throwing the ball away, he was trying to extend plays. As much as we want to look at it in hindsight and say, man, he should have just rolled over and played dead. How many times do you watch your quarterback roll over and play dead and you're like, why isn't he trying harder? What's going on here? No, the moral of the story is Quentin Nelson didn't look 100%, and he just couldn't stop Aaron Donald, which adds him to the long list of offensive linemen that cannot stop Aaron Donald. So nothing to be too ashamed of here. I understand what Wentz was trying to do, but man, it just sucks to see your quarterback get hurt multiple times, especially when it felt like he was rushed back from injury in the first place.
Frank says Nick Foles is available. Well, so is Phillip Rivers. If they really
you want to talk about the fastest way to throw away that first round pick? You're probably going to have to give up, maybe second rounder for for Carson Wentz, is go in and bring in the guy that just absolutely what's the PC term messed with his mind in Philadelphia. I was trying hard not to swear there. You can't go and do that. You just can't do it. I understand the veteran presence thing. The reason these guys on this team are so young is so that nobody threatens Carson Wentz, because we've already seen that kind of spiral out of control in Philadelphia. You don't want to go and pay that high draft pick and then have the same thing happen and be stuck at square one because you wanted to bring in a veteran. To me, there's no way they're making a trade for Nick Foles especially, but really anybody that's going to threaten his job. You just can't do it.
Let's go on to the next team, man.
Let's do it. Let's talk about the Cardinals, our final 2-0 team here, Drew, because let's face it, week 1, they looked amazing, just dominating the Titans. Then week 2, they didn't quite look as strong. Offensively, they were great, but defensively, they struggled against the run, and Kirk Cousins looked pretty good when he was clean out there in Minnesota. Are the Cardinals the real deal? Is this 2-0 just well-deserved, and this whole NFC West is as good as we thought they were going to be?
I think this team is for real, man. I think if Kyler Murray can keep on playing the way he's playing and making these plays, he's so much fun to watch. I know you didn't enjoy it one bit in week 1, but yeah, I think this team's for real. This is the division that you had everyone in double-digit wins, man. This is the division that you had almost every single team making the playoffs. I mean, I think we all agree that this team and this division is probably the best in the NFL. And this is one of the teams that are in it. This is a legit 2-0 team.
Let me just go back to one of these comments here really quick. Chris goes on to say Aaron Donald didn't get a single sack, and Nelson played against Donald extremely well. I was looking at some of the grading. I know a lot of the experts did not agree with that, but again, I watched that game all the way through too. It was one of those ones that while I didn't pay attention to specific matchups, Aaron Donald was back there the entire time. So you can say he didn't get a single sack, but how many times did he just destroy a play because he was right on Carson Wentz? I mean, there were multiple plays where it wasn't just Donald, where Wentz was just dragging defenders left, right, and center. I just don't know that you can really defend the Indy offensive line performance. I know you can point to other guys in the line too. I know Julian Davenport was like just awful in that game as well. But for what I watched from the grading, Quentin Nelson did not have that good of a game either. He also said never mind. We'll move on. Back to the Cardinals. To your point here, I feel like we'd be talking about this team a little bit different if Graham Joseph hit a kick there in Minnesota and they won they're 1-1 instead of 2-0. I think we'd be asking questions about the running game. Now, they looked amazing against Derrick Henry. They just blew up the Titans line. Everybody looked like they were ready to play. Chandler Jones, even outside of the 5 sacks, looked like he was just in the backfield disrupting the run on almost every play in week 1. That kind of went out the window last week. I didn't feel like they were anywhere near as impactful against the run. I felt like Dalvin Cook was a lot more, maybe it's the burst, whatever you want to point to. Dalvin Cook had a much better week in week 2 than the Titans were able to put up with Derrick Henry after week 1. Which do you see being the real Arizona team? Are they a team that just had a bad week against the run against a very talented guy in Dalvin Cook? Or are they the team that it was a fluke that they wound up stopping the run so well in week 1?
I don't remember who said it in the comments, but someone said seemed like week 1 that everyone was missing that 4th preseason game. They wish they had it back. I kind of agree with that. I think week 1 was kind of a fluke, and I think what they saw in Derrick Henry trying to run the ball was not the same that the Seahawks saw in Derrick Henry in week 2. And I think if you would have swapped it and you put Derrick Henry in week 2, I don't think Arizona would have been able to handle Derrick Henry in the way he ran the ball. I think it just took a game for some of these running backs to get into rhythm. And Dalvin Cook is just one of them. I mean, Dalvin Cook is a great running back. If not, he's probably the best all-purpose back in the league. If he's arguably one of them. I still think, even that being said, that Arizona Cardinals are going to hit their faults. There's going to be hiccups and road bumps and speed bumps that stop this team from winning a lot of games, or it doesn't. But I mean, it's as we all know in the NFL, every game is tough to win. But when you see a team like Arizona Cardinals go out and dominate a team that I think is better than in the Titans, and then they go out and play the Vikings, who, in my opinion, are better, but the Vikings kind of came up and almost beat them, but they still came out and won the game anyways, that's a plus side to me to this team. I think the Arizona Cardinals are legit. If they keep on winning, keep making, if something goes bad, still making adjustments like they did against the Vikings, yeah, this is a great team, a legitimate 2-0 team.
And I picked the Cardinals to win this game in a blowout. I wish I would have seen a better performance out of them just disrupting Kirk Cousins, because Cousins has been great this year, quietly. I know Minnesota's 0-2. We'll talk about them here in just a second. But Cousins has been absolutely on fire when he's had time to throw the ball. The question is, will that offensive line hold up? I think Arizona's the real deal, too. I think this is one of those teams that, like you said, found a way to win a tough game. And that way to win a tough game was having the opponent's kicker miss a 38-yard game-winning field goal. But, hey, you take them where you can get them. Minnesota's not as bad as that record would suggest. We're going to talk about them here in just a second. But beating teams like that is how you make it to the playoffs. You know, there are no easy games in the NFL, just like you said. Them coming out with a win speaks volume to staying in these games and kind of focusing more so than the other team did. That was a focus loss by the Vikings, just like week 1 when they were committing all those penalties. It's a focus loss when you miss a field goal, regardless of the situation. I see the Cardinals being that team that maybe they just, with all these veterans coming in, maybe they maintain focus a little bit better than some of these other younger teams they go against, and that can be the difference to get them to that 10, 11, 12 win territory like we talked about before the season. Michael, good to see you.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It wasn't a pretty outing. I mean, 2 interceptions doesn't look good, but he made up with 3 more touchdowns and he ran a touchdown in. I mean, like I said, you can win a game when things are going bad for you. That kind of makes you a better team, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Why don't we move on and we'll talk about the teams that haven't had a lot of success, and we'll talk about, are they as bad as it's looked so far? Let's start with Jacksonville because I want to talk about the Urban Meyer thing, Drew. Is it as bad as everybody's letting on? I don't know if you saw the Urban Meyer kind of apology letter that's been making its way around now for starting so poorly. I look at that and I was like, well, this feels like it's worse than it is. Like, it's been bad. But the apology letter after 2 losses, I see that and I'm like, it's time to panic in Jacksonville. Like, that to me screams crisis.
Oh yeah, this team's no good. It's. I don't think it's really, honestly. I mean, you got to blame the head coach, right? You got to blame the head coach. He's the one putting this together. He's the one that went out. I mean, he's the one that drafted, this, I guess, quarterback. But I can't blame the quarterback. I think it's just. Man, I don't know. This is a legitimate 0-2 team. I think they're going to take the first pick in this year's draft. I had them winning 6 games. I legitimately had them winning 6 games this year. I thought that Urban Meyer coming into the pros, and I just blanked out the quarterback's name. That's how great I am. Trevor Lawrence, and he's just coming in and maybe not being just on fire, but looking like a great quarterback, because I mean he's supposed to be great 3 years ago, and everyone's like, this is the number 1 pick when he comes ready to be drafted. This guy's going to be amazing. But I also just want to dial it back a little bit, and Peyton Manning didn't look very good year 1 when he played.
Right.
I think he led the league in interceptions when he played. I think Lawrence is going to do the exact same thing this year, and it's just going to be growing pains. It's just, can Urban Meyer hold on to his job? Because someone's got to be to blame for this team not being good, and it's usually the head coach.
I'm going to go towards GM side. This is not a roster that's ready to compete yet. We knew their offensive line wasn't going to be very good. Lo and behold, their offensive line isn't very good. On top of that, they franchise a guy like Cam Robinson, who's been like one of the worst tackles in football. They franchise him, give him a huge payday, and he's terrible. So, yeah, I agree. The decision-making in the front office, regardless of whether it's Meyer, whether it's the GM, whether it's the ownership, there's something messed up with how this football team is being built. So I look at Trevor Lawrence coming in. I'm 100% with you. You can't lay the blame at his feet. You have to point the finger this early in a guy's career somewhere else. Look at Sam Darnold escaping the Jets. Look at Ryan Tannehill escaping Miami. Scheme is so important, and we just don't talk about it enough when it comes to a guy succeeding and failing in the NFL. You look at this team, and I got to say, I don't know that it's going to take some drastic changes to the scheme for this to get any better than where they're at right now. Because on paper, Drew, I got to look at it. I got to say, they don't have the talent. Like, they don't have the receivers to really carry this. Their offensive line isn't good enough that you can play conservative and run the ball all the time. Their defense isn't good enough to shorten games and give your offense a ton of tries. It's Trevor Lawrence throwing for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns or bust. And that's just a failure to build a team in the NFL. You can't point to a single strength in this team and say, hey, outside of quarterback that they just drafted for number 1 overall, you can't point to one thing and say, hey, this is what we do better than everybody else. Or this is what we're trying to do better than everybody else.
Look at some of these comments. Ian says Jacksonville's a dumpster fire and says that Myers is gone by week 5.
Wow, that would be great. I mean, if Meyer leaves, it's going to be because he's faking another art problem, and things are just going that bad in Jacksonville. He doesn't want to be tied to it.
Brett says he can't believe he's coaching again.
I'm a little shocked, but then again, I mean, he went out on good terms with Ohio State. I know he kind of retired ahead of time, and it felt like he was setting him up for another Florida-level implosion, but Ryan Day did a great job of keeping Ohio State on their feet, so I got to give him credit for that. As far as what Dago, he says the Jags should have stayed with Minshew this year. It's kind of like the Carson Wentz thing we talked about with Nick Foles. Gardner Minshew would have looked better than Trevor Lawrence. And he has looked better than Trevor Lawrence when he started. You can't keep a guy like that around and expect to keep this high dollar or high leverage quarterback prospect to keep their attitude going. So, like, it was all, their hands were tied. They had to ship Gardner Minshew out of there, right? Because what happens 4 weeks from now if the struggles continue and fans are sitting there cheering for Gardner Minshew to come back in the game? You're not gonna make that happen. So yeah, they had to ship him off to just avoid the controversy.
I don't know what ever happened to the NFL when you start taking quarterbacks in the first round and they have to start in year one. I don't know why that became a thing. I really don't understand it one bit. I don't think there's anything wrong with a quarterback sitting for a year or two. Look at Aaron Rodgers. Look at Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it's okay for these guys to sit back a year or two and allow to learn the game around them. Get them into like garbage time games. Why throw them out there in year one? I mean, Trevor Lawrence isn't gaining anything from this. He's not getting any experience, in my opinion, from getting handed to. He looks terrible. His confidence is going to be on something you have to worry about. I mean, the guy's thrown 5 picks already this year. I mean, there's issues here beyond just the fact that the team's not very good. Are you going to ruin this young man's career?
Well, 2 things happened. For starters, Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco made the playoffs as rookies. And I think that's kind of just set us down this path of, now everybody can do it, right?
I always forget, did Ben Roethlisberger win a Super Bowl his rookie year too?
Wasn't it his second year? I think it was his second.
Was it second?
Yeah, okay. I think it was his second year in Pittsburgh. Let me know in the comments, was it first or was it second? Also, when you talk about this, the other point I want to make, look at just what the media has done. Like, you ask what has changed. Like, we've changed, right? I mean, look at Chicago this year. Andy Dalton's getting booed in the preseason before taking a real snap of football because people just want to see Justin Fields.
That's what Frank says. See, that he goes, that's how he feels about Fields, is they're going to throw him out there just the Lions, just to get ripped apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be honest with you, though, about Fields is the fact that he can run the ball. Not that Lawrence can't, but Fields is going to look a little bit better because instead of throwing the ball, he can make plays with his feet.
And I know on paper, Matt Nagy's supposed to be a better offensive mind than Urban Meyer is. I mean, I know Urban Meyer's had all kinds of success in college and everything, but the whole spiel with Nagy was, man, this is the guy who ran the Patrick Mahomes offense. He's a genius. And then he goes to Chicago, and we're still waiting for the genius to show up here.
It was year 2. Ian let us know. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Appreciate that. But Michael goes on to say the Jags are way worse than expected. I think we all just kind of bought into a little bit of the Trevor Lawrence hype in the offseason, right? Like you said, everyone just thought what we saw in college was just going to instantly transfer over. And this is just another reason why it's not always best to get drafted in the top 5 to some of these teams that just don't know what they're doing. And Jacksonville right now does not look like it knows what it's doing. This should have been the offseason where they said, we're spending all of our money to bring in better offensive linemen. We're spending all of our focus to bring in a bunch of wide receivers. Instead, they sign guys like Marvin Jones, who's like 33. They franchise Cam Robinson, 32, 33. He's been around forever. Cincinnati wasted him for like 5 years.
Hold on, he's not that old, man.
Oh, call me out on it then. How old is Marvin Jones? Let me know in the comments. He's old. He's been around the hill.
31.
31. Oh, okay. A sprightly 31. Let me just say, like, that does not make a good setup for a young quarterback coming in. And the Jets at least tried. Like, you look at what the Jets did. They're like, we're going to get a lot better at receiver. They drafted wide receivers. They paid Corey Davis. They might have been the wrong decisions. At least they were making decisions, right? Jacksonville's just like, I feel like we're good where we're at.
Michael goes off and says also that's the reason why Kyle Shanahan is not throwing Lance out there right now. He's letting Jimmy G. But to be honest, what the Jags look like versus what the 49ers look like, Trey Lance probably wouldn't look that bad playing in this 49ers offense.
I don't know. I mean, I agree the scheme is 100% better, but then again, we're talking about a guy that was young coming out of college, only had like 300 passing downs, I think they said, in college football. Missed a year with COVID because North Dakota didn't play. I mean, if there is one guy I point to and say, like, yeah, he's going to need some time, it 100% is Trey Lance over these other guys. Like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, they were 3-year starters. Mac Jones, I know it was only 1, but man, I mean, he played every snap at Alabama where just historically they sit the guy. I know Tua kind of usurped Jalen Hurts a little bit, but historically they go with the guy until it's your turn to come up. It's almost like seniority at your job at Alabama. So outside of any of these other quarterbacks, I think Lance is the guy who probably you look at and you say he needs a year to develop before we actually pull the trigger and put him out there.
But scheme, team,
sure.
If you're going to pick one,
yes,
it'd be Trey Lance looking probably better with that.
Yes.
Let's go on to our next team, man.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Colts. We'll stick to the AFC South here, Vibe, because if there's one team I think on this list, maybe between them and the Vikings, I would say that just don't deserve the record they've got. I would say the Colts are, I'm going to say a close second behind the Vikings just because the Vikings have lost so many heartbreakers already.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to stop you from talking if you want to say more, but I'm right there with you.
No, go ahead.
The Colts are a better team than 0-2, and it's just a matter of time until they kind of get everything around them. If Carson Wentz can come back and stay healthy, you're going to see this team be really good. But let's look at the schedule. This is purely based off of schedule, right? You play the Seattle Seahawks week 1, and then you play the LA Rams. You're lucky to scrape out of there healthy, and they barely did that because Carson Wentz went down. And to be honest, yeah, maybe the first week didn't look that great, but they played really good week 2. This team is way better than 0-2. It all depends on Carson Wentz. If he can stay healthy, you're going to see this team push to the division, possibly try to win the division in the South. But if Easton's playing, let's get ready for a top 5 draft pick next year, huh?
Yeah. One thing that I've watched about the Colts, though, that at the very least has kind of upset me is everybody's like quoting these bad defensive statistics for them. Like, oh, look how many points they're giving up a game and everything else, or how many yards they're giving up. And, oh, they're ranked here in defense. I forget what the actual number was, but they're close to the bottom. It's like they played Seattle week 1 with Russell Wilson, and then they came back and played the LA Rams. Like, you have to consider strength of opponent when you're considering these things. Like, you kept both of those teams, I believe, under 30 points, didn't they? I don't think Seattle scored 30 points in the first week. So, on paper, you're talking about the LA Rams that look like they're just absolutely explosive with Matt Stafford under the helm. And then Russell Wilson and those receivers, you kept them both under 30 points. You kept your offense in a position where they could win the game. I don't want to hear all this like bad talk about Indianapolis. And Chris, if you're still watching, I might have upset him before by saying they weren't playing Aaron Donald as well. But if you're still watching, if there is a team that I think, again, will bounce back, I would pick the Colts over the Vikings. If I would say there's one that probably doesn't deserve where they're at, I would say the Vikings are probably like one step ahead of this team. So, on paper, I know Carson Wentz is hurt. They're talking about maybe he plays here week 3. I almost think it's tough because everybody knows the Titans and the Colts are going to be slugging it out at the end of the year when it comes to winning this division. So, it's really hard to say you should sit him for a week. But I think that's almost the better decision here because if you play him and he re-injures those ankles and he's going to miss significant time already now with multiple, foot and ankle injuries, if he misses 4, 5, 6 weeks, the season's over. Like we saw Jacob Eason play, we know Jacob Eason is not going to beat many teams in this league. I know giving up a game against the team that you're in basically a boat race to see who can actually win this division. Giving up this game in week 3 hurts, but not as bad as missing 6 weeks and just blowing it with a backup quarterback because something happened to him. I look at Indianapolis, and as much as I want to say they're going to bounce back from this, so much of it just hinges on Carson Wentz staying healthy that I just don't know that I can 100% say they're not going to, continue to struggle because he can't stay healthy.
I even set him out 1 week is still not the answer. Carson Wentz is going to get banged up again. Eason is the backup. What they need to do is they need to go out and get a veteran. I don't care if it's Cam Newton. I don't care if they trade. I don't think it's going to be a first or second round. But if it's a 4th or a 3rd round to go get Nick Foles, go do it. If it's call Phillip Rivers and get on your knees and beg him to come play for 6 weeks, do it. I mean, whoever you're bringing in is not your starter. Your starter is still Carson Wentz. He needs to get healthy. 1 week on these ankles are not going to get him healed. That's what I'm saying. 1 week does not make a difference. It all depends on who the backup quarterback is. It is Eason. It's not going to go well. This division is not going to favor you if you go 0-3, 0-4, and 0-5. You got to bring someone in there that gives you a chance to win this game because the team around the quarterback is extremely talented. Just look at who they played. And like you said, they didn't allow these games to get out of hand. They didn't look as good as week 1 as they did week 2, but those are growing pains, right?
Right.
I mean, it's all about who's going to play quarterback until Wentz is healthy.
I like Frank is still out here flogging for to try to trade Nick Foles from Chicago. So stay on it. Make some calls. Maybe Chris Ballard will pick up the phone, Frank. We'll move on. I think we both kind of agree the Colts are in much better position than a team like the Giants when it comes to bouncing back off this 0-2 record. I'm not ready to call them dead in the water yet just because the Washington game, same deal. If they hit that field goal, is this still the team that, oh man, it's the Giants again? I know everybody's kind of complaining about it, but if they hit that game-winning field goal, or I'm sorry, if Washington doesn't hit that game-winning field goal, what are we talking about here, Drew?
It's a division game. It's a division game, and like we talked about earlier, sometimes those division opponents can kind of just sneak up on you and play better because they're familiar with you. I don't think because they played Washington that well makes this team any better. I honestly, to me, this is a real 0-2 team, and they get Atlanta Falcons this week coming up. This is a game where it's like if you can't win this game, which this team should be a lot worse than you are because you have youth and pieces that you have in place that you're saying is your future. You should come out week 3 and dominate this team because Atlanta can't say that. Atlanta's still living in the past. So I'm going to say they're a real 0-2 team, and this is who they are. But they might change me a little bit if they can go out there and play week 3 and win this game, and not just win it. I want to see them actually beat them by 14 points. I'm not saying that's going to happen. If they can do that, I'll sit there and go, you know what? Maybe they're better than the 0-2 start that they actually were. But until that happens, and I honestly don't think that's going to happen in week 3, especially the way Atlanta played a little bit last week, just showing some life in this offense and defense. I think this is a real 0-2 team in the New York Giants.
To go to Michael's point, he says, if you lose to the Falcons, you are done. I agree. It is make or break this week when they play Atlanta. But I will say, the offensive line is every bit as bad as we kind of predicted it would be. You know, who knew trading away your best offensive guard and Kevin Zeitler for basically nothing to the Ravens was a bad move when your offensive line's already struggling? Who could have guessed that would have happened? But at the very least, I watched that Washington game against what should have been a defense that just obliterated them. Bad offensive line and all.
You never let teams, you never forgive teams for bad mistakes, do you, Jake? Never.
I mean, Dave Gettleman's whole thing is like, hey, we're going to play some bruising football. Again, what do we talk about, like running backs in the first round? They drafted Saquon in the first round, and you're not going to try to put an offensive line out there that can do anything for him? Like, come on, man. Like, you can't shoot yourself in the foot in the NFL and expect good things to happen. It just doesn't happen. These teams are too competitive. On top of that, the only thing that gives me hope with the Giants is this was a game that, in my opinion, should have got ugly. I know Taylor Heineke is not like a premier NFL name, but as long as he didn't make a ton of mistakes, this should have been Washington all day, every day. This should have been over by the second quarter. Instead, it comes down to a last-second field goal that they wind up, Hopkins winds up having to kick twice or whatever because there was the offsides. I mean, I look at this, Drew. I'm just not ready to call the Giants dead in the water yet. I don't know that they deserve it. Like I said, they were one penalty away from beating this Washington team, being 1-1 and bouncing back to play Atlanta. So it's just amazing how one simple mistake can derail a team. I feel like that's exactly where they're at. I got to say, I don't feel like they've deserved it. They're not quite as tough as teams like the Vikings and the Colts, but man, they're still somewhere in the middle, in my opinion, at least.
Tell me how you feel about the Nate Solder signing, another tackle.
I mean, it just doesn't go well signing offensive linemen for the Patriots, right?
You love it.
I mean, I didn't like the money, but I didn't hate the play trying to get better on the offensive line when it happened. What I hate is that they're just like stuck with it, and him coming back from COVID, they're like, oh, well, we brought back Nate Solder. It's fixed again, right? Like, he hasn't played good football for the Giants. You get rid of Zeitler at right guard, too, and it's just, what was the plan? That's what I always try to understand with these teams. What was the plan? And to me, it feels like Gettleman, he's just, I don't know. I don't know. I really struggled to see what the tough smash mouth guy was thinking when he let go of his good offensive lineman because a bad one was coming back.
Yep, I agree. Ian says this game is the yawn of the week. I got to agree, but at the same time, I got some interest in it. I want to know who gets the first pick this year. I mean, these are two teams that honestly could be taking the first pick in next year's draft. Especially
with such a thin quarterback class. It looks like Spencer Rattler, who, again, kind of struggled a little bit early as well. It looks like him and nobody else right now in college football. So the first pick is more important now than it ever has been when it comes to getting your quarterback. I know Danny Dimes has been, kind of been on a hot seat there for the Giants, even though this year he's played pretty well to start. It's like a train wreck to me. It's so awful, but I'm gonna watch it. You can't look away. I just want to see what happens in this game.
Just tell me how much fun it would be to be the announcer of Danny Dimes throwing a touchdown.
I think it would be great, especially in the New York media. But I mean.
He threw a dime, Danny Dimes for a touchdown.
And then you got to come out and say, "Oh, Danny Dimes fumbled again." I wish him well. I hope good things happen for him. But I got to say, I feel like they just don't quite deserve 0-2. You know who does?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Detroit. Can we just agree this is every bit we thought it was going to be?
I for some reason, and don't ask me why, have this soft part in my heart that Jared Goff got done dirty. And I want to see him succeed in Detroit. And I just know for a fact it's not going to be this year, and it's going to struggle. And it's tough. But at the same time, is this schedule based? Look at 49ers. Then look, you got the Packers. Is this a schedule thing where and yeah, these games kind of got out of hand, but it's not like they put up 3 points. I mean, you saw some playmaking ability out of this team. I mean, is this schedule based where they are an 0-2 team? Is this team actually better than what it is? They're not better than the 49ers. They're not better than the Packers. They're not going to win this division. They're not going to find the playoffs. But are we talking this team being a top 5 draft pick? Or are they going to be more in 10 or teens?
We're going to be talking about this team being a top 5 draft pick. They don't play defense well enough. Jeff Okudah is missing the rest of the year, so that's just all out the window. That hey, maybe we at least develop a corner this year. I just kind of dumped on the Giants for saying hey, what was the plan? At least we see the plan in Detroit. I may not agree with it. I feel like they should have gotten more weapons, and they should have done something to replace Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones walking out the door. But they just didn't do that. They were just well, we'll sign Tyrell Williams and just see what happens. It'll be funny. I don't know. They signed Brashad Perriman and they cut him before the season starts. They haven't done enough to replenish their weapons in 2021's NFL, where you just have to be able to throw the ball a little bit. They're building in the offensive line, and I have some respect for that. I say all the time, you win the game in the trenches. That's what they're focused entirely on. They're working on the offensive line. They're trying to buff up this defensive line as well. It's just, this feels like a multi-year rebuild. So you ask me, are they going to be a top 5 pick? Yeah, I think so. I agree. They kind of, LA just sent Jared Goff off to die in Detroit, I should say, when they traded him away. But that's just the reality when you're a $30+ million quarterback and you're not getting the job done, right? The team is just going to have to try to escape. The same can be said about the 49ers spending a top 3 pick to replace Jimmy G. How much better would this team be if they had spent that pick on some other position? So while I agree, yeah, it's a tough break for Jared Goff, here's where you got to go and spoil the party by winning 3 or 4 or 5 of these games this year and making it so your team can't draft a replacement to get rid of you. So,
well, it looks like they're going to have a high draft pick this next year coming up, getting it from the Rams. Ian says after 5 years, he's going to admit it. He was wrong. Detroit wasn't going to win a Super Bowl. Ian, I'm just glad that you came to realize that you were wrong. Frank says it's not going to be next year either for the Lions. He's down the Lions for at least 2 years, saying that they're not any good.
I agree.
Dago says the Lions played good early. They just need wide receiver help. Do you think that's what they need, Jake? Is it
massively.
Wide receivers?
Massively. They need better linebackers, in my opinion. They still need help in the secondary, but wide receiver is the number one part and parcel thing this team needs, because the offensive line, at least on paper, not a bad group, and then they go and draft Penei Sewell to just really put the icing on the cake there. Yeah, they need weapons. I think DeAndre Swift is fine. I think Jamal Williams coming in from Green Bay is fine, but you can't just get by with 2 running backs and an offensive line in 2021. You didn't do enough.
TJ Hawkinson, too. But I got a question for you.
Sure.
You believe that they are a top 5 draft pick this next year coming up?
Yes.
And you're telling me the wide receiver is the most needed spot that they have.
Yeah.
You're the first one to tell me that you're not really huge on running backs and wide receivers kind of being drafted that high unless they're
4 different reasons, though.
At least, right, but you still say that. Is this pick in the top 5 have to be a wide receiver, or are they going to use it on that pick of the Rams that they got?
No. I mean, a lot of it just comes down to draft position, where you really do wind up finishing, who's actually there, who comes out, who doesn't. You never go into a draft saying, man, we need a wide receiver, we're drafting for need, no matter what happens, we're taking our wide receiver. That always leads to disaster. Instead, that's how you get a N'Keal Harry. What you need to do instead is say, we're just going to continue to take great football players. And to their credit, they did that with Penei Sewell. But if that's what you're going to do, and you've got guys like Kenny Golladay leaving, and you don't want to pay him, fine, that's great. You've got Marvin Jones leaving, and you expect he's going to get more of a payday, fine, that's great. Sign somebody else. Sign somebody that's not Tyrell Williams, who wasn't good 2 years ago, missed almost the entire year on injury, then sat out with COVID and didn't play at all, and now is coming back, and you sign him to be a number 1 wide receiver?
But it seems not going to happen. They just let their number 1, number 2 receiver go this offseason.
Well, that's my point. If you're going to let those guys go out and throw the money at somebody else and bring them in. I don't care if it was a Corey Davis. I'd say at least they tried. That's what the The Jets worked out Juju Smith-Schuster. They ultimately settled on Corey Davis. They tried to get
That's the problem, though, Jake. No one wants to play in Detroit. You're gonna have to draft these players.
Deal. So pay them more money, or franchise Kenny Golladay before he's able to leave. Instead, they were just like, we don't need you.
That I agree with completely.
Yeah,
completely.
So, they didn't do enough at wide receiver. I 100% agree that it's handicapped them for the rest of the season. But I think Detroit went into this saying, look, we know we're going to be bad. We're kind of just like waiting for this Jared Goff contract to run out. And, we've got a couple first-round picks because of it. We're basically eating salary for the Rams. We're going to be bad for the next year or two. And then maybe, just maybe, Aaron Rodgers is going to be gone. If Fields doesn't work out for the Bears, Kirk Cousins is now starting to get older as well. Things are starting to look a little more sunny here in a couple of years in the NFC North. Now, that kind of goes to crap if Fields is good for the Bears and Kirk Cousins stays on top of his game, and maybe the Packers kind of solve things with Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love pans out. But at the very least, they're almost like, we're going to ride out this Rodgers storm, just build as much capital as we can. And look, we're almost aiming for having that high draft pick by saying, Jared Goff, good luck throwing to nobody. Except TJ Hawkinson.
We need to get off to the next couple of teams, but I want to answer a couple of these. Dago is completely agreeing with you. He says, "Nah, they don't draft a receiver that high." But
if it was like a one
money in the wide receiver free agency, that's what I meant. That he was agreeing with you. If the free agency, then you spend money there.
If it was like a one receiver draft class and you had a Jamar Chase or take your pick. Any of these great wide receivers there, and there's Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith. If it was one of those guys and everybody else was like way behind and you're going to spend a top 5 pick, I'd say roll the dice. Like if you were getting a Megatron, fine, go ahead, take a shot at it, right? Yeah. But more often than not, there's just a bunch of good wide receivers in these drafts here lately. If that trend continues, why spend the top 5 pick when I'm going to go down to the bottom of the first round or the top of the second and get a very qualified guy like DK Metcalf when it was a second-round pick. A.J. Brown was a second-round pick. There are so many guys that Justin Jefferson fell in his draft. You don't need to spend top 5. If you're going to do that, do like the Giants did, trade back.
Still never understood why you fell that far.
Nobody ever does. Like Metcalf, Brown, all of these guys. Like all of them, unexplained when they fell.
Ian says, does Detroit go after Juju in the offseason? I don't think it's that they won't go after him. It's does Juju want to go to Detroit?
I think they kind of turned their nose up at him. I don't remember if he worked out for them or anything like that, but I don't remember hearing any significant, because he was out longer than most of these other receivers before ultimately settling on returning to Pittsburgh on like a discounted rate because he couldn't get a deal. I think there's just some sort of stigma on Juju that nobody seems to want him. I don't know if they're afraid he just like disrupts the locker room or what it is.
I don't remember that. To be honest with you, I thought the top 2 teams were the Chiefs and the Steelers, and he chose to go back to the Steelers.
I think they just couldn't make the money work for KC, if I remember right. I think Juju just was expecting a big payday hitting free agency, and it never came back. So he's like, all right, I'll do one more year with Pittsburgh, and hopefully next year the cap goes up like we all expect it to. I think he just thought he was getting a Sammy Watkins deal, where it's like, you're going to pay me $13 million and I'm going to be your number 2 wide receiver, and the Chiefs are like, we don't have it.
We'll give you 8.
Yeah. So, and then he wound up taking 5.
I don't know. How
Dago's taking shots at a former Titan great wide receiver, Khalif Raymond. So, we'll
move on to the next team, man.
Let's talk about the Vikings next, because this is one of those squads. I've already said it. I've already kind of gushed over them. Don't love their offensive line either. But this is one of those situations where they tried to fix it, right? They drafted Christian Darrisaw. He's out for the rest of the season, it looks like, or at the very least, he's on IR. He's going to miss some time. Does this team bounce back, or do you think this offensive line just continues to haunt the Vikings in a way that they never really claw their way back into this NFC North?
I don't like the Week 1 loss to the Bengals. That really kind of hurts my opinion in them, in the sense of, is this team better than their start at 0-2? I can't really get too mad at them when they lose to the Cardinals again. I just spoke highly of the Cardinals. I want to say so badly that this team is better than the 0-2. I think I had them at 11 wins during the offseason. I still think that they're talented enough to do that, especially the way it seems like Adam Thielen is reinsurging himself back into this offense. I'm going to believe this is not real. I'm going to believe this is just a hiccup in Week 1 and they played a better team in Arizona, and that you're going to see a difference out of them in these upcoming weeks. And it's going to start against really a tough team in Seattle and then Cleveland afterwards. You're going to see if this team is real or not. And if they could beat one of these two, even if they end out in these next 4 weeks, they're 1-3, they're better than an 0-2 start.
Yeah, I think it's just tough when you lose a couple games on focus. It's really about how you respond. They had the fumble in overtime with Dalvin Cook week 1 where they wound up ultimately losing to the Bengals. You have the missed field goal in week 2 to the Cardinals. More than anything, I say teams can overcome focus when they're coached well. And I know Zimmer has been there for a little while, and he hasn't necessarily, he hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been like, wow, they have one of the best coaches in the NFL either. So this is one of those teams that's kind of stuck in the flux. And the question to me is
better than average.
Yeah, I agree. He's better than average, but you're not looking at it and saying, well, they got to the NFC Championship because Mike Zimmer was smarter than Kyle Shanahan. Agreed. He's not smarter than LaFleur. That just hasn't happened yet, right? We haven't seen him game plan his way ahead of other coaches in the league. So
he's above number 16 ranking, but he's not above 10. Is that where we're going to kind of put it?
I don't know. You'll have to tune in for our NFL coaching ranking, power ranking episode. We'll have to do that here soon because that's very intriguing to think about. But at the very least, when I talk about the focus losses, this is where coaching has to come in and shine. And like you said, to your point, they need to steal one of these next 2 because if it's 0-4, that's where focus losses start to become more problematic when you can't really claw your way back into the season and you're looking around like, man, the Packers figured it out or the Bears figured it out or both of those teams figured it out. Notice I left the Lions out. You just can't overcome it at that point. So, in my opinion, they need to get it back on track here. I'm with you. They're not dead in the water just yet, but man, that schedule is really going to put them through their paces. They need to get focused because mistakes against teams like Cleveland and Seattle, like you talked about, you're not going to win games like that.
No, you won't. Let's go on to the next team, man.
Let's talk about the Falcons, dead on arrival, right? Moving on.
I don't even have anything to say.
Man, yeah, if anyone deserves this record probably more than anybody else, I'd say it's the Falcons. Let me ask you this. I'm not even going to ask you if they claw back. Go ahead.
Jake, sorry. Just because you're the only one that's going to get this. They're not any good. I don't have anything to say about them.
Yes, absolutely. I don't have anything to say about the Atlanta Falcons. Let me ask you this. We're not asking if they're clawing their way back in. I think just about everybody under the sun is saying the Falcons are dead. They're the dead birds now at this point instead of the red birds. That's actually the Cardinals. Anyway, the one question I want to have for you, Drew, is it time, and do I have to eat a little bit of crow for saying they shouldn't have traded Matt Ryan in the offseason? Is it time to trade Matt Ryan?
I'm not going to lie to you. I think trading Matt Ryan probably ended 2 or 3 years ago. And I know that's crazy to say because the year before that, it was 2 years before that, he went to the Super Bowl. But the value of Matt Ryan and what you put into him and what he meant to your franchise has dwindled. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot from him. I don't think he's like a Phillip Rivers where a team's going to kind of salivate and go after Phillip Rivers, or I didn't want to even put him in this category, but like a Peyton Manning where he ended his time and someone he's not going to get shopped around a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. I think when Matt Ryan gets released, because I don't think he's going to be traded, I really think he's going to have a hard time finding a starting spot. And that's not a knock on Matt Ryan because I think he is talented. I just think these last couple of years just kind of shown if you don't have enough around him, he's not going to win any games for you. You're not going to put this game on Matt Ryan's shoulders and he's going to go out there and win you games. It's not who he is anymore. And it's unfortunate because he had a good career. It's just, that's what I see in him. Good quarterbacks overcome bad situations, and Matt Ryan seems to have a problem doing that.
I agree, but man, when you talk about a bad situation, they spent so many picks in this offensive line for them still to be playing like an absolute, one of the worst units in football. They really haven't spent a ton on defense, and when they have, it hasn't really worked. You talk about their wide receiver group. Like, to me, when I said don't trade Matt Ryan in the offseason, it made sense if you were going to keep Julio Jones and you were going to keep Calvin Ridley and you were going to bring in Kyle Pitts and you were going to say, we have so many of these great weapons, you're not going to be able to do enough to stop us. That's where it made sense. Then they traded Julio after the draft, and it's like, okay, well, now what? Like, what does this team have? Like, you can't leave a guy like Matt Ryan hanging out to dry with a bad offensive line. He's like Kirk Cousins, where you have to protect him. He's not mobile. He's not going to make anything happen with his legs. You have to protect him for good things to happen. I think they should trade him now. I think you might have some suitors in teams like maybe Miami if Tua's going to miss some significant time. I know it sounds like he's going to be okay. I would consider trade.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'd consider trying to flip him to Washington right now. Maybe 2 weeks from now when Taylor Heineke's lost him another couple games, maybe that's when you try to make that move. I think that still exists, that trade market for Matt Ryan. I think teams are probably going to be high enough that they're going to be looking around, especially teams like Washington, and say, if we just get average quarterback play, and we know that the ceiling for Matt Ryan is much higher than average, but if we just get average quarterback play out of Matt Ryan, we can go to the playoffs and maybe have a shot at a Super Bowl.
Okay, so I totally misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you were meaning like at the end of the year during the offseason to trade him. If you're talking about mid-season
like now
trading
is
him,
the time to trade.
Yeah, dude, absolutely, it's time. But you're not going to get it. Arthur Blank's not going to allow that to happen. Arthur Blank is a zombie on the sideline. Watch that guy. He just looks creepy. He's
nice
not
guy,
going to do it. He's like Jerry Jones. Even though he's not the GM, he's controlling what happens in that GM's office. He is the guy that makes the decisions. He's not going to trade Matt Ryan. He trades Matt Ryan, you're going to watch ticket sales go down.
Yes.
But I agree with you, man. If they can get that done, if they can sit there and say, Arthur Blank, here's your sleeping medicine and for a week and let him do that and get him traded, yeah, absolutely. I think you can actually get a first-round pick out of it.
No love for Felipe Franks coming in?
Because I think that teams are in that much desperate of a need. I mean, even look at the Colts. What if they brought in Matt Ryan? That's a great team.
Ian literally just said the same thing. Why not trade him to Indy? Theoretically, you just did that. And if I'm Atlanta, I'm like, well, you probably just promised you. So the problem with that Indy deal, because they offered a conditional pick, they have to now keep the first and the second pick that they offered in order to exchange it with the Eagles when at the end of the year based on how much Carson Wentz plays. So you can't trade either one of those picks for Matt Ryan. You're now talking about trading a future first-round pick multiple years down the road. That's just not great team building. There's no way I see Indy making two blockbuster quarterback trades to try to make that happen. It would have to involve Carson Wentz in some sort of like trade of picks. And if you're the Falcons, you don't want that. On top of it,
you're right. I didn't really think about that. I was just thinking about a quarterback need.
No, I know. It's like on paper, Indy looks great, right? Like, man, we'd love to have a guy like that come in. But first off, you're talking about already mind messing with Carson Wentz that you just traded all that to give away. And then you're talking about giving up more draft capital to try to make that happen. It's not feasible in my mind for that reason. Dago goes on to say they should try to get something for him. Here's what I would ask. I would go to Washington right now. I'd say, give me your first-round pick. Give me a third round this year, and then give me a second the year after that. I'll give you Matt Ryan, and maybe I'll eat a cap hit if you have somebody that you're ready to get off of your team. Kind of like Detroit did, where they said, hey, we know you can't really live with that Jared Goff contract. Send him to us for a year or two, because this looks like a multi-year rebuild in Atlanta, doesn't it?
No, it does, but they're not going to get that much out of him, man. They're gonna, if you're asking that much, you're probably going to send a second round, or if you could talk him down to a third round also with Matt Ryan. 3 picks for an aging Matt Ryan.
But this is the window. And not to mention, here's the thing. If you're Washington, you're not going to be anywhere near sniffing a quarterback next year. This is your window, right? Like you have this this offensive line that's about to be paid. They're young. They're extremely athletic. You've got these receivers like Terry McLaurin who haven't been paid yet. You have Curtis Samuel who, again, kind of on a bit of a rehab, but Curtis Samuel's in there playing. You have Adam Humphries who, again, with the injuries, we don't know how long he's going to be around. This is it if you're Washington. Maybe I have a couple years and I'm not close to sniffing a quarterback if Fitz isn't ready to come back and play good football for me.
Dan Snyder remembers the trade for Robert Griffin. He remembers that. He remembers giving all those first-round picks. He's a guy that remembers. Can you imagine him giving that much off for an aging Matt Ryan?
If I was I was the analytics guy sitting next to him, I say just because you made a mistake in the past doesn't mean you can't stay. You have to you can't shell up because you made a mistake. You have to stay aggressive in today's NFL. This is how you do it. And I'll give Snyder this: he's nothing if not aggressive when it comes to what this guy wants to get done in the NFL. So I understand that bias of like, hey, we did this once and it burned us. You just have to keep pulling the trigger until eventually it works. I know I've used that metaphor a couple times. I'm going to try to stay away from it. But you just have to keep swinging the bat until you hit that home run. And I think when you're talking about Matt Ryan, it insulates you. You have a good offensive line. You can rely on him there. You have wide receivers. Fitz looks like he's not coming back anytime soon. You have the ability to make this happen in Washington. I'd be on the phone right now to try to get it done.
You don't owe Ryan Fitzpatrick anything. If you go off and trade Matt Ryan, you don't owe him anything.
Throw him on IR. Yeah.
You don't owe him anything. I agree. If I was going to pick a team, to be honest with you, it would be Washington to make the most sense. I don't see Arthur Blank or Dan Snyder pulling the trigger on either of these. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Matt Ryan will stay. And I think it'll be this offseason where we're talking, where does Matt Ryan land? And I think you're going to see the market being very low for Matt Ryan. If you got anything else, man, let's go on to the next team.
Just one last point. Here's the danger of staying conservative if you're Arthur Blank. There looks to be one quarterback prospect right now in college football that's going to be worth his salt and worth that top pick. You can't let Matt Ryan spoil your pick by winning you 4 or 5 games like I talked about with Jared Goff in Detroit. Like, this is the race for the bottom this year. It's not like last year where you said, I didn't get Trevor Lawrence, but I got Zach Wilson, or I got Justin Fields, or I got Mac Jones, or I got Trey Lance. And, the list went on last season. This year, it's like Spencer Rattler, and I'm not even sure how I feel about him. So if you're drafting a quarterback,
buddy.
You're going to sign Danny Dimes off the trash heap if the Giants cut him? No, it was
a joke.
The options are so much thinner this year. You have to make the decision early and get out in front of the curve. I'm going to read these comments, and then we'll move on to our last team. Ian says, how does a bad team get a new stadium every year? Hold the city hostage and say, well, we'll move the team, we swear. He also says, it's a multi-decade rebuild in Atlanta. That might be a little harsh as quick as things turn around in football, but we get the joke. And Dago goes on to say, Washington needs to jump on this now. John says, Spencer Rattler is not the best college football quarterback. Name me somebody who's better that's going to be coming out this year for a guarantee. I agree, he's not the best in college football, but man, what you look at this quarterback class, it is thin coming into this year. And we knew this was going to be the case, and you still had teams kind of passing on quarterbacks and saying, I'll figure it out later. Well,
let's go on to the next team, buddy.
Let's talk about the Jets, just because we're contractually obligated to. 0-2. Are they right where they should be?
As much as it pains me to say it, yeah, because the way they played these games, the outing of them, they're taking way too long to adjust to the game plans that are sitting in front of them. The first halves always look very bad, and the second half's like, oh, okay, I can see why they went out and got Zach Wilson, but it's just not pretty. I mean, you put up 20 points total in 2 weeks. I know your offense isn't supposed to be your powerhouse, but that's what you built on all off season, going out and getting this quarterback, going and focusing on wide receivers. I mean, this is kind of what you wanted to be somewhat becoming your strength, and it's just not. It doesn't look good. They're going to be facing the Denver Broncos, another really tough defense to play against. It's just not looking pretty. And then after that, it's the Tennessee Titans, who seem like they kind of got back onto the wagon they're supposed to be driving since week one. Definitely did not make it to that one. It's tough. This is a real 0-2 team, and it's another team that I thought was going to make some leaps and bounds and win a lot more than maybe 1 or 2 games, but it looks like that's what they're going to do this year.
Absolutely. Let me just read John's following up comment here. He says, Sam Howell minus the game against Virginia Tech. That's a pretty big minus when you're talking about a money game in there. I mean, we've had 3 games. He looked good against Virginia, looked bad against Virginia Tech. I'm not ruling out Sam Howell eventually taking that spot, but man, 3 weeks into the college season, especially in that game, and I'm looking up his stats right now where he threw the ball only 21 times. Is that your first overall quarterback? I don't know. Do you go into that saying, oh, well, I'll deal Matt Ryan because I'm going to take Sam Howell and everything's going to be fine? There's just not that pedigree that we had with guys like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields coming out. I'm not discounting your pick from him. I'm just saying I need to see a lot more before I'm ready to say it's time to turn the keys over to Howell as my NFL quarterback, John. To the point of the Jets here, Drew, I 100% agree. Like, it just, especially once Carl Lawson got hurt, I looked around, I was like, it's just like this defense kind of deflated for me a little bit. I felt like they weren't going to be as strong rushing the passers as they would have been if he had played. I look at it, they tried. At the very least, they brought in wide receivers this offseason. They drafted Elijah Vera Tucker high. They did the right things that you're supposed to do to protect a young quarterback. It just hasn't quite panned out yet. I know Corey Davis has been that security blanket outside of the Patriots, really just taking him totally out of the game. It's just, I don't know. I look at this 0-2 team. They're going to win, 3, 4, 5 games this year? And we're going to call it, are we going to call it a success when they do? That's my question, because it is improvement.
Yeah, dude, if they get 5 or 6 games, yeah, absolutely. It's great for them. I think that's a great improvement.
But what if it's 3? Like, what's the line for you where you're like, man,
5.
Things didn't get better than I thought they should be? I agree. 5 is a good number. 4, I'll at least throw my hands up and say, hey, it didn't work out this year, but we need another year's worth of team building before it's there. Anything less than that feels kind of like a failure.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But, I mean, let's be honest. They also don't have their number 2 receiver. Like you said, injuries are happening. I still think there's plenty of playmakers on this defensive side of the ball with May and Quinnen Williams and their linebacker, Mosley.
Right.
It's this team should win games. That's why, if I remember correctly, I think I had them winning 6 games. It's a team that should win some of these games, and you should see leaps and bounds of growth in that offensive side of the ball with Zach Wilson. But after week 2, and it looks like going into week 3 and week 4, it doesn't look like it's going to be anytime soon. I mean, these are tough teams coming up. Broncos are going to play them tough. Titans are going to be tough. Maybe they can make something happen with a secondary in the Titans that don't look that strong. I don't know.
Yeah, this is all about adjustments. The offensive line has to play better because as much as we said, they drafted Vera Tucker, their left tackle, whose name I'm drawing a blank on right now. He's looked pretty good even though he's been injured. He looked good all through last year. The protection hasn't been as strong as we kind of expected that it might. It's just growing pains with young quarterbacks. This is just what happens. I think we kind of been spoiled by some guys like Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, and going back to the day with like Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco coming out. We've just been spoiled that, hey, guys can hit the ground running. We've seen a lot of rookies, especially in these past couple of years where COVID's played a part in it, not start as strong as we have seen in years before. So that's kind of what I look at with the Jets. I'm not hitting the panic button. I'm not saying, they took the wrong quarterback just yet. I just want to see slow and steady growth throughout the year, and then let's build the team for next year. So I agree. I'd like to see them get 4 or 5 wins because on paper they look like they should get close to that number. It's just they have to limit the number of turnovers, so they're not going to get anywhere near there.
Right, it doesn't look good. What he threw.
Thank you, John.
He threw 3 picks in like the first half against the Patriots, but we all kind of knew that was going to happen. That's exactly what I said. Belichick's going to tear him apart. Let's see what happens. I don't think week 3 is going to be a good, fair adjustment on Zach Wilson. Maybe week 4 when they're behind and they're trying to catch up to Titans. Maybe he could pick that secondary apart a little bit, and they were kind of like, okay, he's got some growing he can do.
Do you want to go over Thursday's game, Drew, or have we prattled on long enough?
Felt like we already have.
Yeah.
Carolina should destroy him, right?
Yeah, I think so. Carolina wins. Houston loses. All's right with the world, right?
It seems like it. Tyrod Taylor out. Who is there? I don't even
Davis
know
Mills, third-round quarterback. Yeah. Third-round quarterback, I think, from last year.
I don't know who that is.
They spent their first pick they had on him. So, listen, Davis Mills, again, another one of those guys that you're like, man, we haven't seen enough out of him in college. Imagine that. He went to Stanford, I believe, and didn't get enough reps in the Pac-12 that didn't play football in 2020. This should be a slaughter. I really think that's the big kind of emphasis here for Houston was they were winning games because Tyrod was just making magic happen. They have a veteran team that, just went up against a weaker team in Jacksonville, a younger team in Jacksonville, and really just beat them with experience, in my opinion. That doesn't happen with Davis Mills. All that experience went out the window when Tyrod got hurt, and it's going to be like that for the next 3 weeks. So it's going to be tough there for Houston. I did tell you wrong before the show. Houston's actually at home for this game on Thursday. It's just a short week, coming off of playing a team like Cleveland. All signs and indication point to the Carolina win, and usually when that happens, I like to pick the upset. I just can't do it with Houston, man. I just can't do it. I don't have it in me.
Cameron says, Panthers in a close one, no more than 14 points. I said they needed to score over 14 points to be a legitimate 2-0 team earlier in this episode. So I'm with over 14 if the Carolina Panthers want to be considered one of the better teams in the league right now.
The line's at 8. Do you think it stays closer than that, Drew?
I saw 7.5. Not that it matters, but
I think I saw 8 a second ago, but they move.
Right. Like I said, it needs to be for. Carolina's going to win this game. I hate picking what the score is going to be. All I'm going to say is if Carolina wants to be considered legitimate, it's got to be more than 14 points.
I agree, and I think this is where the defense really shows up. Like, you're number 1 in the league. Time to embarrass a rookie quarterback that really doesn't have the team around him. Like, that's what I want to see. Even more than Sam Darnold. Like, I think we've kind of seen, okay, if we stay close and we play some of these conservative games and we don't ask a ton from him, he can go put 300 yards on the board. I want to see this defense really come out to shine against Houston, show up on the road and embarrass a guy that, let's face it, has been handed the wrong end of the stick, the short end of the stick. That's kind of what I want to see this week. I know outside of that, like I said, I almost always go with the underdog when everything points towards an underdog not winning. I just can't do it today. I don't know. I feel like we're finally going to see that Houston team that everybody predicted to be as bad as they were going to be this offseason.
Ian says he picked Houston as an upset, but he really thinks Carolina can win by 16.
Yeah, I think they're going to cover the line too.
Oh, he said, sorry, 6.
Okay, well, I think they're going to cover the line. I think they're going to get 8. I think you're going to be surprised. I think this might be the game where Sam Darnold needs to come out and say, hey, look, my money's coming up. These are the kind of games where I really, really need to go and impress. I think this is where he puts another 300-plus yard performance on the board. So I'll put my money on that. I think that's what's going to happen this week. And do you have any final thoughts on that, Drew?
I want to get a shout out to everyone that commented. I see Thomas jumping here. Guys, thank you so much for your likes, comments, shares. It means the world to us. It helps us grow. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube. That is a platform that we're going to be pushing all of our shows and episodes to throughout this year. It is a slow crawling process, so bear with us as we get there. Don't get me wrong, we'll still be live on Facebook, but YouTube is where to check us out. But for all the love, Chris, Ramy, Ian, Jeremy, Cody, Frank, Sharif, Joey, Michael, Dago, Cameron, Thomas. You guys are all awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, YouTube just treats us better. Facebook's that abusive relationship we just can't get away from. But we are glad to spend all this time with you guys. Thank you so much for each and every one of the comments. It was a fantastic show. Long, I know. Drew, I said we wouldn't have enough to talk about. Here we are an hour and a half in. So I appreciate all you guys' patience for sticking with us throughout it. Great comments, great everything. We will be back soon. I don't have a date for you. Soon. Live, perhaps. Anyway, we will catch you guys on our next show, which hopefully is Thursday, but I don't want to commit to it. Again, bad with relationships like we talked about. We'll see. Hopefully see you then.
See ya.